Hi everybody, I'm Zach and I like movies, and I'm back again for another entry in my Letterboxd Criterion Challenge for 2024. And it's a spooky one this time. This is prompt number 41, which was to watch a movie from the 1920s. And I went with kind of a big heavy hitter one from the silent era. This is The Phantom Carriage from 1921. It is a Swedish film, a very important Swedish film from a director, Victor Sjöström. It's like S-J-O Strum. So I'm pretty sure I pronounced that right. Right. And yeah, this was a very influential movie for Swedish cinema. Very and a huge inspiration for the Swedish cinema master Ingmar Bergman, who would like constantly make callbacks to it in his work, and he even got to the point that not only would he cast Victor Sjöström, the director and actor, in his movie, one of his later period movies, Wild Strawberries, and as the lead, he would like in the 2000s, he directed a TV movie about the making of the Phantom Carriage. This really was like the master's favorite movie, and that's fascinating. But also, I can see why this movie really holds up well for its age and the time it came out, and it was and even for like the time it came out, when cinema was still sort of finding its voice and seeing what all it could do, like with its just sort of like better molding the form of cinema, and just finding out where it could go and what it could do, what could be done with it. It feels very like forward thinking. So what this movie is about is it's essentially like a moral fable and a bit of a horror movie and a bit of a fantasy as well. Well, again, it's doing a lot. Where it starts with this Salvation Army sister, the Salvation Army worker, Sister Edith, and she is in bed. She's dying of tuberculosis, and she wishes to see. She calls for a nurse, and she wishes to see David home one last time before she dies. And we cut to David home, and he is a rebellious drunkard. He is just out and about, being just an absolute callous man. And he tells his drinking buds about the time when an older friend of his named George told him about some superstition he had, that the last person to die every year before the stroke of midnight on New Year's Eve, they would become the coachman of a phantom carriage that would travel around and retrieve the spirits of those who died for the following year. They would death was like a sort of like, just a revolving door of new faces, but they would still have the same. It would still have the same look to it. It would be that there's just this like ghostly horse-drawn carriage with this this figure shrouded in a black hood and a scythe, carrying a scythe. That classic look of death. But then David and his buddies break into an argument, and one of them hits David on the head with a bottle, and it looks like he dies. Like his spirit rises up from his body in that kind of like double exposure effect you see in these old movies that they looks really great. And and then the Phantom Carriage arrives, and when it arrives, it's like really haunting. It's like this haunting shot. It just like appears through the darkness to the sound of this like screeching, wailing violin strings, and as our suspicions are confirmed, the coachman is in fact his old friend George, who comes in, and he sits down and he talks to David, and he forces David to relive the important events of his life and confronting all of his sins and eventually atoning for them. So it's kind of like a Christmas Carol, but he's only being visited by the ghost of Christmas future. And it's that is essentially kind of the movie, and like after and like it's sort of employing this like these extensive flashback sequences that like where we're seeing David, we're seeing like David, where he was like, he's where he like has a happy family, and he's like, and like they're out in this beautiful field and picnicking, and then their picnic like gets faded out into him with his drinking buddies, just in complete squalor. and and I would note that the flashbacks, they're a little tricky to follow the first time around because they aren't in like strict chronological order. It's not in the cues to how each scene relates to which one, and how like it can't, the cues about like how they relate to each other, they're kind of minimal. But I think this way, the way that it is structured, it makes David feel more like an evolved character. He's his arc isn't so much like watching sort of watching the rise and then the fall. We're sort of like it's seeing the fall and then coming back to, and then sort of piecing together like how did we get from here, how do we get from the high point to this low. Again, familiar to A Christmas Carol, but I think there is much more. I think especially for the time it came out. Again, this is 1921. They are not. We're still like figuring things out, and it makes this narrative much more involved for the audience and really innovative for the time. Again, like I can't really stress out how just impressive it is to see a movie like this a movie this old. It's like 124 years old now, 123 or so, and it still feels so sturdy and so innovative for the time that it came out. It holds up. Absolutely it does. And it does, and like as we follow this like sort of like fractured back and forth of David being strong, seeing his life fall apart. It's less that we're like it's less that he's reflecting on himself, and more like just being outwardly judged by somebody else, and like telling him, it is like a confessional, like telling him like this is this is what you've done, you need to repent for this. And there is some spirituality to it because of with the ghost the ghostly aspect of it. There is like certain religious angles to it. Given that it is like a very it is kind of like again, it's a moral message movie about like recanting from a sinful life. But I also feel like Sjöström has a lot of compassion for David, even when he is even when he's showing us at his cruelest. When he's like sort of like when he is sick with tuberculosis, and he's like kind of threatening to like spread it to his children, to his wife when he's drunk, and when he's like when he's actually in the scene when he's like completely breaking down, he's like on a like a drunken tirade, storming his house with an axe, and like quite literally like chopping down a door in a way that is very similar to The Shining, like shot to shot. It feels like the only thing missing was like when he's like up against the door going like, "Here's Johnny," or whatever the 1920s Swedish version of Johnny Carson was. And yeah, the influence of this movie is like, it goes deep, and it's and you see why. It's like when you watch other like classic silent movies, not just the dramas. You also have like your comedies, your Buster Keatons and Charlie Chaplins, but you also your horrors, like ones like The Man Who Laughs, and of course Nosferatu, and it's beautifully shot. Like, wow, this is this looks so good, and the design of these sets, these buildings. I also it's also like clearly like very clearly effects driven, and I would and it's I think sometimes it leads to some like occasionally silly looking moments where like there's a shot of like a man like when it's like illustrating the effect of you know, the people dying on New Year's Eve to then become the Phantom Carriage. One of them is showing a man who's like he's like drowning in the ocean. He's being like just being like just like assaulted by the water, and then you have like the horse-drawn carriage just kind of like walking across the crashing waves of the ocean. It looks a little silly, but yeah, it's this it's a beautiful movie. It's a beautifully understanding movie, and I think it is a movie that still it's a movie that reminds us that the silent cinema era still demands respect, still demands it still demands our attention, and it has things to offer. It's, you know, they're not just like they're not just these like old stuffy pieces of pretension. They're these it's a very true, very humane movie, and I think it's wonderful. I'm very glad I watched this. I would highly recommend this, and I definitely want to check out more of Sjöström's work. Because he's impressed me so far this much. I can only imagine that he would be any of his other work would be just as good. And yeah, kind of inspired. I kind of felt like I kind of got a bit on a kick of other more silent era horror movies, just kind of looking around and seeing. And in fact, I actually have a recommendation that I should have on my wall somewhere. Yeah, here it is. I also would recommend, if you're interested in something like The Phantom Carriage, I would also recommend Haxen, Haxen. This is a really cool and also an innovative movie, an innovative horror movie, and kind of a documentary about witchcraft. It's marvelous, and yeah, Phantom Carriage, wonderful. Silent movies, I think, I definitely deserve their time in the spotlight. And they always surprise me. And they like even ones that I know that are great, like the ones like The General and you know, City Lights and something and ones like that. They always give me something I wasn't expecting. And yeah, it's they're all they're very charming in their age and in their sort of almost quaintness. And yeah, wonderful film. Love it. And I guess that'll be it. I'm Zach. I like movies. As you can see, I have a lot more movies that I need to keep watching. And I hope you keep watching movies too. And I will see you all next time.